You probably have a friend who's a victim of domestic violence. You too may be a victim without even knowing it or being in denial. We're going to talk about domestic violence right here on Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.
Don't just reject convention. Drown it out. Introducing the all-new 2013 Lexus LS F Sport, an entirely new pursuit.
And by WWJ News Radio 950, keeping you up to date with the latest news, traffic, weather, sports, and business information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Live, local, and committed to Michigan's future. News Radio 950, WWJ.
Thank you. I'm Henry Baskin, host for this edition of Due Process, and we're going to talk about something that is a pervasive part of our society. It just doesn't go away. It just seems to grow and grow and grow as a problem. We're talking about domestic violence, and we have with us, I introduced Beth Morrison, who's the Executive Director of Haven. Welcome back to Due Process.
Thanks for having me.
Ashley Lowe, you are Professor Ashley Lowe.
Yes.
And you are intrinsically involved in domestic violence over at Haven, right?
I actually am at Cooley. I run the family law clinic, but we work closely with survivors.
Yeah, well, we need lawyers to process these cases through. Thanks for coming in. It's just that we're doing social problems this week, and it seems that domestic violence in all forms. And I wish maybe Beth, you could tell us it's not just the physical hitting; it's other things.
Absolutely. Domestic violence has a wide continuum of abusive behaviors, which could be physical, slapping, striking, strangulation, pushing, shoving,
right.
As well as emotional abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, financial.
Right.
It really kind of covers the whole gamut, and some victims might experience all forms of abuse, and some may only experience one or two.
Ashley, you've seen these people go through the system and then back out at the last minute, no doubt.
Yes.
Because they're being abused.
Right.
And they feel that they're going to be abused more if they go forward with what the court can give them. We talk about financial abuse for a second. Mm-hmm. Don't these people know that they're being denied access to goods and services that they should have as a wife or the lover or the partner of someone?
I think one of the biggest pieces of domestic violence that we see is the isolation, so that the only information that a survivor may be getting about their situation is coming from their batterer. So they may be saying, this is all you're entitled to, this is all you can get. If you go to court, if you bring me to court, you'll never get anything. You'll end up with just the debt and none of the assets.
Right, and they believe that.
They believe it, right, because that's their world. That's all the information they're getting is from this one person.
When I visit a care house, I'm surprised to see not only women, but almost adult children as part of it, part of the people who are being tortured by the batterers. And, it's just that every county seems to have some place to put people as shelters. It's a shelter. Universities, I was surprised to hear, had shelters when that personal protection order legislation was passed. Michigan State had a shelter for dating relationships. Mm-hmm. You're sort of with boots on the ground, representing people who can't afford their own console.
Right.
What can you do to convince them that they are being abused?
I don't know that it's my job to convince them. I think it's my job to make sure that the resources, the legal resources, are there when they're ready. But I think people have to come to that decision on their own. Hopefully they're working with counselors at Haven. That helps a lot. If they have a counselor who can talk to them and give them feedback about a little bit more reality-based about this is not, you don't have to live this way and you don't have to live in that world. But if we try and convince people of something, they're not going to be ready to hear it.
When they come to you, Beth, finally get to your shelter and receive psychological assistance and help, it's been a long road for them. I mean, they must have put up with years and endured years of abuse. What finally makes it happen for them? What finally causes them to say, I need help, I can't put up with this?
I would say it really varies greatly from one individual to another. I mean, some it might be years of abuse, others it might be more short-term than that. I think there comes a point, it seems, where an individual realizes it's never going to get better, and in fact it might get significantly worse. And that could be maybe a weapon is now used, or the intensity and the frequency of the abuse has increased. The threats have become more and more real. The abuse is now not just abuse towards them, but also to their children, to their pets, to other loved ones, family members. It could be the first time there's been police intervention, or maybe there's been a trip to the emergency room.
How do the police react to these calls? I'm sort of curious, because at one time they were labeled family problems or family trouble calls. When I was on a police force, we'd say, oh, we got another family trouble call. Police would knock on the door, say, how you doing? Okay, let's quiet down, or I'm going to put you in a hotel or whatever. But now people do realize what it is. But there are women who go to work every day putting makeup on their bruises so their colleagues, even in big law offices, can't see it. I mean, who intervenes? Who's the person that should say to that person, you need help? You need to do something. You need to get out.
I think it could be any number of people. It could be a friend. It could be the friend that hears the stories over and over and keeps listening and listening, and so that the person who's going through this violence knows they have a safe place to go when they're ready to go. That it could be their family that sticks by them during all that horrible years of abuse.
Tell me some of your stories, Ashley, of people that you've recently helped through the system.
Well, I feel like recently we've seen a lot of people who have endured a long term. We just met with someone the other day who had been living for 30 years with an abuser. And her trigger, the reason she's finally ready to leave, is that her kids have grown up and left the home. And her last child was graduating from high school, and then she was ready to go out and start her life fresh.
But she left a legacy for her children. They lived there. They saw this. Are they likely to become abusers themselves? Or endure abuse?
Without some kind of intervention, it's not uncommon for children who have witnessed abuse over their lifespan and as they were growing up as children to become abusive or to be a victim themselves. But I think also, though, that doesn't necessarily mean that your destiny has been stamped, that's
right.
What your life has to hold, that there's a lot of things that can change that. But I think also, in fairness to the individual who maybe stayed in the relationship during the whole time that the child or the children were growing up, that might have been the best and safest thing for her and for the children. That we often see that when young children are involved and the relationship ends, there's a fight for custody. That can be an awful battle.
Right.
The children often end up with the batterer, the abusive partner, full-time, part-time, shared custody. And the mom isn't necessarily then in a position to be able to be the one who puts herself between the children and the abusive partner, because she's not there. So
tell me the process. My neighbor feels that she's being abused. Okay, but she can't afford console, she doesn't have any resources, but she's being humiliated publicly. What's her process? What does she do? Where does she go? Does she knock on the door at Haven? Does she make the call?
For many, that's what the first step is calling our crisis line. It might be a supportive friend who says, here's a place that you can call. But for many, it's calling just to get information on, there's a lot of confusion. am I really a victim of domestic violence, you know, or what's going to happen if, and just having somebody to kind of talk through the possibilities, to talk through the resources that are available, to find out about a program such as the Family Law Project at Cooley, that there are resources that are out there, that you don't have to have an income to get an attorney, you don't have to have an income or the ability to immediately move into housing, that there are organizations such as Haven and others who can help kind of wrap you around those types of
As a matter of fact, there are several in this area. There's
Absolutely.
Oakland, Wayne, Macomb. We have a full-screen graphic that you were good enough to supply a Family Law Assistance Project, and well, Haven is there. Wayne County First Step, Detroit Interim House, Macomb County Turning Point. So if you make the call, you're invited in.
Absolutely.
You don't have to have money. You don't have to have a lawyer bring you down. And you intervene, and you give them their options, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, Ashley, after they go through that process, they come to see you. And what do you do with these people?
The first step is an interview to get their basic facts and understand what needs to happen right away and what can take a little bit of time. Sometimes there's safety planning that they've started with their counselor at Haven.
Right.
That might involve getting a personal protection order. Very often what we see is somebody applies for a personal protection order and it's granted, and then the batterer files to terminate that personal
Right.
protection order. So we would come in from the Family Law Project and help represent them at a hearing to maintain the personal protection order so they have the protection of the court going forward in the initial stages of that separation.
Right, and hopefully the batterer will get the message from the court, hopefully.
Right.
But sometimes they cross the line and they just don't abide by it. There was an issue that came up about the cultural differences in relationships between man and woman and between husband and wife, where in Saudi Arabia this is my property, you're my property, and things such as. Do you run into that at all?
We do. We have a lot of clients from a variety of cultures where it is, we are doing some education to our clients to say, this is not how you have to live. This is in the United States, you don't have to endure this type of abuse or treatment because we have different values.
Okay, and what happens?
And then we can go to court and get the judge to enforce those. So,
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we want to talk about, encouraging these victims to seek help, or at least have the initial conversation. We'll be right back right after this.
Legal referrals and more information on this and other related topics are available on our website at www.dueprocess.tv. There you'll find information on today's program, helpful hints to legal issues, support materials, and lawyer referrals. You can also stream previous episodes of Due Process.
Causes, as we're doing. We're back on TV talking to our friends from Haven, which is, it's not a unique, but it's a well-peopled place. The resources are there. How do we encourage people to make the call, just to find out what's going on? They're unhappy. They may have physical abuse. They may be victims of physical abuse. They may be embarrassed at a cocktail party by a husband. They may be treated as housekeepers instead of wives, instead of and even people living together. And we have people, we have men who abuse men. We have women who abuse women in those relationships. How do you get them to make that first call? How can we get the message out here?
I think the great thing about a crisis line such as ours, as well as the others in the metro area, is it's confidential. You can call anonymously, and it's free. And so it's an opportunity to be able to call and talk to someone who has training, who has experience, to be able to kind of lay out what's happening in your life, and to be able to kind of have a neutral person sort of help examine that, and to look at what is happening to me, and what are my rights as a human being, and what services are available, what resources are available, but to kind of start just that education process that what's happening to me isn't okay, and to kind of have that validated. So I think it's just really you know, the more the community can talk about Haven, can talk about domestic violence, can talk about that it's a crime and that it's not okay,
Right.
the more people hear that and see that and go, you know, it's happening to me, maybe I will call. And so as loved ones, as employers, people, you know, with a faith community, to be able to support and to say, you know, here's a place in our community, if you ever need them, call. And if you keep hearing that, you're going to call and take that first step.
Right. It doesn't have to be the final step. It has to be the first step that
Absolutely.
says, hey, at least get some information about what's going on, how you can prevent it, and how you can be a happier person and your children. But I don't understand it, and neither do you or you, because those of us who've dealt in this area know that we just can't believe some of the stories and some of the abuse people take and how cruel. Let's talk about the women, for example, in the cycle that they go through. And I know we repeated this, but to people watching this program for the first time, I think it's important to tell, what is a cycle of violence that occurs?
So typically, and then it's different for every single person, but the cycle goes that there may be a violent incident, and then that is, maybe there's police called, maybe there's court intervention, or maybe not. But after that, there's often a honeymoon phase. So a time when the batterer is now sorry about the behavior, is contrite, says, I'll go to therapy, we'll get counseling together, I love you, let's make it work.
Right.
And then there will be a little bit of time where that is in place, or just kind of a peaceful time. And then there will start to build tension. So tension starts to build leading up to another violent incident. And the cycle can be a few days, or it could be years. So it varies in relationships. And it doesn't always happen, but it's quite common.
So we accept that cycle because we know, I don't know of any cases that where a woman was abused verbally, physically, and all that, and then everything suddenly got better. I mean, those are stories I'd love to hear, but I don't hear them. You don't hear that many. I mean, you protect people. You say, look, come on in. I'll give you a place to stay. I'll take care of you for a period of time. But in the meantime, you've got this man, let's use that as an example, circling the building and saying, you know, I'm going to get her for doing this to me. Or are you going to go to the police and try and have me arrested? I'm going to get you. How do you pacify them? How do you make them feel empowered? How do you make them feel that they're not going to be attacked? How do you get that message across?
Well, there's never a guarantee that you can offer them, that they won't become further victimized by the abusive person, whether they seek services or not. Statistically, the most dangerous time is at the time of ending the relationship, or even right after it's left. You know, domestic violence is all about power and control, and that person, the batterer, doing all that he can do with whatever behaviors it takes to achieve and then maintain that power and control. And so that's why ending it is not easy, and that's why ending it isn't an automatic, that as soon as the relationship's ended, the abuse is over. Often the abuse just escalates at that point in time. And that's why it's really important for for survivors to be able to get information about resources that are available, and whether that be a personal protection order or attorney's involvement, or an organization like Haven's involvement and law enforcement involvement, to be able to narrow the opportunity.
But they've said to me, this will only make him angrier. If I call the police, he's going to be angry. If I file for divorce, he's going to be angry. If I don't withdraw my personal protection order, and he's going to be even meaner to me. Or how do you reply to that kind of assessment? What do you do?
Well, I think one thing is important to validate what any particular victim is feeling, because they are the expert in their own lives, and they know what their batterer is going to do. They've been living with that person. But there is some evidence to show that getting the courts involved actually reduces violence among particular parties. So even getting the act of going to get a personal protection order causes the amount of violence to go down.
Okay, let's go through the personal protection order process. At one time, Haven was able to help people fill out the forms. I don't know if they still do that.
Yes.
Go down to the courthouse in any county you live in, and someone's going to be there to help you fill out the forms, right?
That's right.
And then you go before a judge.
And most of the time you don't go before the judge. The forms are submitted to the judge's clerk, and then hopefully an order is issued without having to appear before that judge.
And the order says what?
It could be anything. The order could say that the batterer can't assault the petitioner, or that they have to stay away, they can't have any communication, they can't call, they can't text, they can't send letters, they can't drive by the house.
Okay.
They can't go to their place of employment, which is a pretty common tactic.
But if they're married, you can't get them out of the house, can you?
You could, yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's not as common. Courts often want to have a hearing before they do that, but they often will remove somebody for the home for a short term, and if the batterer wants to return to the home, they can file a motion.
Is it axiomatic that if you get a personal protection order, you're going to file for divorce?
No, not necessarily. A lot of times people file just to get safe and then let some time pass in order to kind of get their other emotional needs met before they go forward on really finalizing the end of the relationship.
Well, it's like you have situations where the intention of personal protection orders, going back all that time, was between people who had a relationship. Not kids on a playground, not a neighbor who threw garbage on your lawn. And you don't deal with that area at all. I mean, we try to discourage that. But I had a woman in that I was talking to, and she said she was going to Haven getting counseling. Okay? In the meantime, she's giving her husband money to gamble with, but she's getting counseling. Now, are there psychologists or social workers that work with these people?
Absolutely, and we have a lot of individuals who come through our counseling program as they're trying to figure out leaving or not leaving, staying, safety planning, starting to plan leaving, or filing for divorce or moving out or seeking custody or whatever while they're still living within the relationship because of their fear that if I abruptly just say, okay, this is it, and I leave tomorrow, that I could be dead, my kids might be harmed, my kids might be taken away, etc. Whatever that fear is, that's probably been very well planted by the abusive partner. So a lot seek counseling in advance, which is great because it can help again with safety planning, looking at
you mean future planning?
For future planning. Right. Planning for today as well as planning on a safe or the best way, safest way I should say, to be able to work towards ending the relationship.
Well, everywhere in the state of Michigan, a woman gets killed on a weekly basis. It just seems that way. The prosecutors up north, the northern Michigan, say, in effect, during the winter is our toughest time because people are locked in these places and in these cabins, and he or she starts this process. But when you see that, I'm sure you've lost people who have been shot and killed, as I have too. And I'm thinking, is a law strong enough? Is a message strong enough? For example, a woman goes to a physician on a fairly regular basis. Does the doctor have an obligation to report not the bruises, but does the doctor have an obligation to report what that woman is saying to him?
There is an obligation for medical personnel. It's complicated, so it's not a quick and easy answer. But I think that, and part of the answer is, are the laws strong enough? We have in Michigan some great laws on the books around domestic violence. They're not always put in place. They're not always utilized. They're not always enforced the way that certainly an organization such as ours would like them to be. And so I think that we have a long ways to go as a community, a long ways to go as a society to really make what's already available really truly available to all in the community.
Well, as a practicing attorney, I have found, you've found, that it varies from county to county.
It does. But one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, getting the court involved helps reduce the level of violence. But that only happens when the courts enforce their orders. So if the court says you can't come near this person and the batterer does go by the house, they need to have a sanction. They need to have jail time, they have to pay a fine, something so that they know the court is serious, and then that reduces the level of violence.
Well, hopefully it does. So tell me your success stories. Have you had a lot of them?
We do have some wonderful success stories of individuals. One, a woman who came to us probably about a year ago, and she had kind of typical history of abuse over several years. She had young children. She finally felt that she was in a place to be able to end the relationship. She went into hiding, eventually came to Haven, stayed at our shelter for a few months. She was able to work with the Family Law Project and some others kind of in a team approach to help her to be able to get custody and be able to move out of state and start a new life. And she's in contact with us periodically, and she's doing great, and the kids are doing great.
They're doing great. Okay, well, that's a success story.
It is.
That's what we like to hear, that, if you start the process, that Haven will stick with you, and they'll even provide care and lodging and whatever, and attorneys.
Right.
Thank you for coming in. I think it's important that people understand that Haven exists for a reason. There is no financial gain for Haven. It's just to protect people from violence, and hopefully their children will learn from that experience and be, good citizens and disregard the cultural aspects of some of these horrible cases that we see, where the man regards you as property, or your partner regards you as property. So thanks for coming down again.
Thank you.
And we'll encourage people to make that call. And
Major funding for due process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.
Don't just reject convention. Drown it out. Introducing the all-new 2013 Lexus LS F-Sport, an entirely new pursuit.
And by WWJ News Radio 950, keeping you up to date with the latest news, traffic, weather, sports, and business information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Live, local, and committed to Michigan's future. News Radio 950, WWJ.